Hello everybody and welcome to another book review, and I've kind of changed things up. I'm actually using a little bit of old technology that I have in a new way, so I appreciate you coming and joining me for this. Today I am reviewing a really cool little book, something that I at one point wouldn't have necessarily picked up, and when I did pick it up and I was sent it, I just absolutely adore it. And one of the reasons why I was sent it was I had one of the authors coming on to my podcast. That episode is going to be coming out in October sometime. And it is Thrifty Witchery, Magic for the Penny-Pinching Practitioner by Martha Kirby Capo and Vincent Higginbotham. And Vincent came on to my podcast and I had a lovely, lovely chat with him. So Vincent was somebody I wanted on anyways because he came out with a book a couple of years ago called How Witchcraft Saved My Life, and it was really in alignment with some of the work that I did. Unfortunately, it's out of print now, and I believe he's reworking it, but it was a wonderful, wonderful little book. One of the big pieces that people coming into witchcraft often come with is a lot of religious trauma and trauma in general, and Vini's book really kind of spoke to that. How witchcraft can be used for empowerment, how can witchcraft be used as a form of healing, and how witchcraft can literally save your life. It was certainly his experience, and we speak a little bit about that in the podcast interview. There's many other podcast interviews that he's done around that book particularly, and I really highly recommend you go and track one of those down. For today, though, I was curious to speak to Vini after the fact, as this was coming out. So this one just came out. I believe this one has been only out for a couple of months, maybe a month or two. So it's really, really fresh off the shelf. And I was curious to speak to him about, first of all, what it was like to write a book with somebody else, because How Witchcraft Saved Your Life was his very first book. He's been writing for years, but this was his first published non-fiction piece. And then also, what was it like to work in collaboration with Martha on this? And I've caught a couple of interviews with Martha and her process and kind of what she brings to the table. And he said that the process was so wonderful because he trusted Martha, and they had a really good flow because of that. And I think, in truth, looking through the book, you can see that. With some collaborative books, you can tell usually when somebody has written a section, even if they're not saying that they've written it. You can usually tell because the styles are different, the tone is different. But with this one in particular, there's a flow that really binds everything together. I actually really love this book. I love this book because it focuses in on taking away the clutter and taking us back to a place of doing magic with what we have at hand. So the back cover, it says, first of all, I should say, so Vincent Higginbotham is the author of How Witchcraft Saved My Life. Mostly self-taught, Vini follows his gut in all things magic, but spends plenty of time researching. He has a dedicated practice with the goddess Hecate. And then Martha Kirby Capo is the editor of the Agora on Paphios Pagan. It's probably where you've seen her name, and a member of Circle Sanctuary and Covenant of the Goddess. So she's been around in the community for a very, very long time. She's presented at pagan events and can be heard on KPPR, Pure Pagan Radio. So the back cover here, you can just about see it, is a practical Pennywise roadmap to spellcasting. Discover the secrets to practicing magic on a budget. Featuring more than 40 exercises, Thrifty Witchery shows that intuition, wisdom, and intention are more important to your magic than expensive trinkets. And just looking through the pages, there's so many pieces in this book about using what you have on hand. And I think that that's really an important piece to all of this. One of the draws for me with traditional witchcraft has been about connecting in with what the folk would have had on hand. some of the other forms of witchcraft, they demand that you have a specific tool, and that's good. That's good because sometimes those traditions work with spirits where that specific tool is geared towards particular spirits and working with those spirits. Traditional witchcraft and folklore traditions, they're generally organically built up from what people had on hand, usually pre-modern and medieval. So I would say, if anything, this book really calls us back to that place. I'll just read out the chapter titles here, because I think that would be very, very helpful for you to kind of understand what's in this book. And I should say, so Vincent doesn't come from any particular tradition. He's not initiated into any of the major pagan or Wiccan traditions. And he came to magic and witchcraft by himself. He experimented a lot with himself and his magical craft. So a lot of this comes from that, whatever he's been able to find throughout his journey. So his particular practice has really evolved organically based around the needs of his life. So the first, it's in, how many sections here? 5, 6, 7, 8. So there are 8 chapters. Actually, no, there aren't 8 chapters. There are... Here we go. So there are two major parts and 8 chapters. Yeah. So the first part, very common with a lot of books like this, is working on self. The intangibles, self-empowerment, intuition, wisdom, and intention, really kind of looking at that worldview and kind of how you're conceptualizing some of these things. And then the tangibles, so practical foraging, finding of tools and things, fabricating, and then conclusion. And throughout the book there is also a lot of points of disclaimer, points of concern, especially in the foraging section, but it's really about empowering people. And when I met with Vincent a couple of weeks ago, that was one of the major pieces of the takeaways from the conversation. Was it's about empowering people, and it's about empowering people to try things out, to take ownership of their practice, with the confines that if you belong to a specific tradition, you work within that tradition's rules. I have to be honest, I was a little intimidated going into the conversation with Vincent because I didn't really know him before. I only knew him online, and I didn't really know him that well apart from seeing his book here and there, and maybe a podcast episode here or there. And he has this really disarming way of just cutting through the bullshit. Like, he reminds me of quite a few of the guys I went to high school with in my small town here in Ontario. Really just gets through the bullshit, has led a life, right? He's led a life, he has a story, and so his practice and his whole lifestyle is really based around that journey, right? And no bullshit, and I just really adore that. So when we met, I was asking him about empowerment pieces like that, and I suspect that he has a very good bullshit detector. Just the way that he framed certain things and he talked about certain things, and I think that really comes through this book. I think that really comes through his pieces of this book. When I say he talks about empowerment, when they both talk about empowerment in this, it's about kind of deconstructing the narrative that you have to have this specific tool and this special thing and this and that and all the other, right? Where they talk about intention, they also talk about being intentional. And I really resonated with that because that's one of the major pieces of my own book, is being intentional. When you get behind that intention and being intentional, your practice can grow in a very organic way that you can take full ownership of. And I get the sense throughout this book that personal responsibility is a big key piece to this as well. So although it's about thrifty witchcraft and practicing on a budget, what this book is really doing is giving people permission to explore and take ownership of their practice, and not feel like they have to buy expensive things in order to practice witchcraft. I feel like that's pushed a lot, again, by certain I don't know if it's certain books in the community or if it's just a general idea in the community that, the more flashy your tool is, the better it is. Well, if you don't know how to use that tool, then it doesn't matter how expensive your tool actually is. It reminds me of something that Devin Hunter and Nicholas Pearson was talking about the other day on their own podcast, and they were talking about, does size matter? Which was a whole conversation. But they were talking about, does size matter? Does a crystal that is this size versus that size, is one better than the other? And Nicholas made the point in there of saying, well, they are different, but again, if you don't know, like if you can't tell or discern that difference, then it doesn't matter as much, right? You're really contrasting apples and oranges, even if they're the same. Like if this is a huge big crystal and this is a tiny little rock, well, they're going to have different properties, right? And the same thing can be said of Martha and Vincent's book. So let's just give you a sense of, let me see, let's just give you a sense of one of the examples here. So let's see which one. Okay, let's do Ragbag Spirit Bag. So 198. Let me see here. And I really do like, I like puppet making myself. I really do like making spirit vessels myself. Here we go. So Ragbag Spirit Bag. You can fabricate all sorts of handy bags to use in your witchcraft. They can be large enough to hold a bone divination set, tarot or oracle decks, or small enough to hold crystals, pebbles, or feathers. Bags help keep your witchy supplies organized, and if you need to be discreet about your practice, can be effective ways to keep your tools hidden. So they go on to say how you can make your spirit bag, or how you can make your sacred bag. So what you'll need: old or frayed articles of clothing, right? Scissors, a yarn, ribbon, or string long enough to tie a bag closed. Short, bigger plastic straw, right? This is for the drawstring at the top. So the point they say in this is, even torn and tattered articles of clothing have sections that are still usable. Determine which witchy tool you'll be making the bag for. Larger items require more material, while small items need less. And then they go on to just describe do the little drawstring bag, right? And then possible uses: any kind of pouch for supplies such as gemstones, bone divination sets, tarot, oracle decks, and luck or spirit bags, right? I've actually used an old piece of an old t-shirt in making a puppet once, because it was a piece of fabric that was available, and because it was really connected with me, that the fabric, because it had been on my skin for so long, the fabric was saturated with me, so it was a good way to create a puppet for something that I wanted to use for myself. So there's all sorts of things you can do with that. And that's just one example from this book. There's multiple other ways and suggestions and advice. And what I love is how grounded it is in the experience of these two. It starts by talking about both of their experiences. Jason Mankey says, unlike a lot of books being published today, there's no judgment in these pages. Being an ethical consumer has always been a challenge, perhaps now more than ever, and Martha and Vini share how to navigate those challenges, but they don't do it in a way that shames someone for shopping at Dollar Tree or eating a value meal at a fast food restaurant, right? Like, there's magic in a hot sauce packet. Don't let it go to waste. And that's very true. Friends of mine in the UK made a good suggestion that if you look at the spices that are in a regular Paxo mix of stuffing, you'll have all the spices that you can use for a protection charm, right? So it's about kind of looking at what's available, looking at what's on hand, looking at the mundane in a magical way. And so that's why I love this. And I love this particularly for folkloric or magical or traditional witchcraft folk, because so much of our own practice is built around that, looking at what we have on hand. So many folk traditions and so many magical traditions, especially in the United States, conjure, southern hoodoo, right? Appalachian folk magic, granny magic, right? It's the same thing. It's about focusing on what you have on hand, what you can have. Do you need to have the industrial quality grade of lavender? Or can you go and get some lavender from a local field? Do you need to have the very expensive, beautifully dried leaves of, I don't know, whatever it is? Or can you go to the grocery store and get them, right? So those questions are all asked and talked about in this. So the interview that I have with Vini is coming out in October. Keep an eye out for that. I absolutely loved talking to him, and I really look forward to sharing that with you. In the meantime, this is out now. You can order it on llewellyn.com. If you're outside of North America or wherever books are sold, if you're outside of North America, I'm pretty sure that this is distributed everywhere because it is a Llewellyn book. Keep an eye out for it and go and get yourself a copy because it's just lovely. And as I said, I really got a lot out of it, even though I didn't think I would. And that kind of shows some of my own elitism piece there. Anyways, have a good rest of the week, have a good rest of the day, and thank you.